Welcome back to the Comm podcast. It has been a few weeks, Epos. How are you doing, sir? Feeling better? You were a little under the weather there for a tiny bit.
Yeah, we basically had a repeat of Christmas week in that I was really sick for like 2 weeks, and then we had a massive snowstorm, and school was canceled for most of the week, and it's just, I'm glad to be back.
I love that. I love it. Welcome back, sir, and hopefully not frozen. You guys got a ton of snow, didn't you?
Yeah, it was ridiculous, back to back to back. We had flooding, and then snow, and then a couple days, and then like 3 days straight of snow. I am ready for spring.
Well, before we dive into the show today, I'm extremely excited. Every time we take a break from recording, I fill up like a spring. There's so many things I want to share with you and talk about, and I get so amped. But some new Astrobot news came out, and I feel like it wouldn't be a Dual-Com episode if we didn't talk about Astrobot.
We're starting with it.
Yeah, let's just start right there.
Yeah.
What are the new levels like?
They are a doozy. They are pretty challenging. They're kind of like a cross between the challenge levels, like the shape levels on each of the galaxies, and the time trials. And so you still only get, you have to start over from the beginning each time. The new one is really hard. I've seen a lot of people in the Astrobot subreddit like wondering how people are even beating it at all, and then other people are getting like 30-second run times on it somehow.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. The biggest tip I've seen for the newest one is to turn off the music, because like you can play it to the rhythm, but if you are not good at that, it will just throw you off, and I think that's what messed me up. My kiddo and I came in here because we've been real excited. We've been trucking through, and when the levels started coming out, if you are unaware, they're doing
it's like weekly.
Yeah, like 5 new levels in this new section weekly, and so the first 2 have come out. The third one is coming out this week,
27th, I think. So
yeah. And so we were super stoked, and it took me 40 minutes to beat the new one, the second one. And I did that right before doing the Great Master Challenge to beat the game, and so that was rough.
Oh my gosh!
But it's a lot of fun. And then we went straight from that to picking up Astro's Playroom, and have already plowed through that.
Dude, I love it. So you have all the bots now at this point, even the ones from Astro's Playroom.
Yes, we have 324 out of 324 at the moment.
Well, if somebody is new listening to the show, we talk about Astrobot because we both have kind of fallen in love with it since Christmas, and it brings up a lot of good discussion points about classic game design and supporting a style of platformer and just joyful game that a lot of times AAA has just been overlooking, right, these days.
Yes.
And so it's really fun. When you were playing Playroom, what did you notice? What stood out to you? Because in many ways, right, the DNA of Astrobot is in every single one of the games that he's been in. And I feel like this is the PS5 Astrobot release is the only one that mainstream has really taken a bigger look at, or the magnifying glass has been shined on it.
Yeah, the problem is, and I obviously don't know what happened behind the scenes here, but clearly every single Astrobot game up until this point, including the one that we talked about, supposedly shipped on the PS4, the Playroom.
Yep.
Like these were all just tech demos. Like Astro's Playroom was purely a learn how awesome the DualSense controller is kind of game.
Yeah.
And so they put their heart and soul into this, and they've been building up these characters and this world. But like, I think that's how they got the freedom to just do a classic kind of platformy game, because it was only meant to be a tech demo, basically. And then the Rescue Mission VR is a PSVR tech demo. Like, they weren't necessarily supposed to be full games. And then I guess after enough, either they impressed Sony with the quality, or it was popular enough within the niche communities here that they gave them a green light to make Astrobot. But like, clearly they have been doing this the whole time. There's definitely a bit of a polish jump from Astro's Playroom to Astrobot, which is expected. That's fine. Something I love is that you progress the story, and I don't want to spoil. It's not like a complicated story, but going back to Astro's Playroom from Astrobot and seeing like, oh, this is how we got into this situation is pretty cool, and like finding all of the bots that are inside your PlayStation mothership kind of deal, and it has the old school Crash Bandicoot Gauntlet style hub world inside of it.
Yep.
That took me so back. Like that was nice. You kind of have it, I guess, with the galaxies, but it's not the same as literally like running around and then jumping into the worlds. Like there's something special about that feeling.
It's so good. And I was going to just say, like, we were going to talk about PlayStation VR 1 a little bit later in the show, but why don't we just go right into that? Because I've been playing Astrobot's Rescue Mission. You had mentioned that they'd made a VR game, and it's really cool. And it's very similar to Astrobot PS5 and Playroom. So much so that there are even the same bosses from the PS5 as bosses in Rescue Mission. So I got an old used PSVR headset. I know I'm 10 years late to this whole VR trend. I was never really that interested. I was always worried about like motion sickness and stuff. And honestly, the cost of entry was high. It's still high if you're going to like get a new headset. It's more affordable than ever, but for me, it just wasn't on the radar. But now PSVR is used, pretty affordable. The games are extremely affordable. You can pick up Rescue Mission for like $15 or $12 over on eBay. Yeah. And I got to tell you, if you can find a headset, it is really, really cool. They managed to do basically the Astrobot game design. There's 5 worlds, 5 levels per world. There's a boss at the end of each world. And with the DualShock 4, dude, they do so many cool unique mechanics with the touchpad, and the camera can see the controller. It blows me away that the DNA in Rescue Mission is the exact DNA that's in the PS5 release. They are super similar, and it ultimately supports the argument you and I made back in probably episode 1 or 2 of this podcast, where when a developer knows their space and they aren't forced to create a new IP every single 3 or 4 years, they're able to lean into their strengths. You can get something that is so good. FromSoft is exceptional at this. I really like that they keep the formula fairly similar. There's always a unique twist, a unique change, but they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Of course, they can try a new style of game. Sekiro is one. You know, Armored Core 7, they aren't honored. Armored Core, sorry. I was playing Ace Combat 7. It's like
already leaking it.
Yeah, NDA blown there. There you go. Ace Combat 6. No, just take it away. Take it away. I'm done. I'm out. I'll see you guys later.
Armored
Sleep
Core
great
6.
this weekend. Yep, we're done. You get what I'm saying. From sticks to what they are good at. I'm very curious. Okay, before we talk about like the PSVR games that I've played, what's your experience with VR? So many people in the comments, since I've been mentioning it, sounds like a lot of the viewers have VR, have tried it before. What do you think of that whole space? Because this is pretty darn new to me.
So it's been in such a weird spot. Like, you have this expensive accessory, and I know I've seen a lot of the comments. People are really mad when you say that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're buying new, because you don't always want to get used with certain things. But like, especially if you're buying new, because the specs, like the technology leaps after a couple generations are massive. So you don't always want to go super old. And I'll provide my own context for that in a moment. You have this expensive accessory, and then in many cases, you are so locked into what you play. And like with your experience, you picked up the PSVR 1. The big thing that bummed me out, because I was ready to jump on Rescue Mission, is that it's not compatible with the newer PSVR thing. And
which makes no sense to me. None.
It makes zero sense. Like, on a technological level, it makes no sense. On a game market level, it makes no sense. Like, I cannot begin to fathom the decision here. And so you have to pick which, and I know this sounds like consoles, but it's a console for your console. You have to pick which platform you want based on the games you want, and most often you want games across multiple of them. And so, like, you can't use the PS1, the PSVR headset with PC games. You can't use this with that. You can't, and so you have to do this 4D chess to figure out what you actually want to invest in, or just buy it and immediately sell it off when you're done with whatever 5 games you were probably going to play. There is the limited game library that you're going to play on it. And then there's the technical hurdles of, like you mentioned, possible motion sickness and all of these other considerations. I myself got a lucky chance at starting with the original Oculus Rift back in the day.
Wow.
I got to try it at a game show, and even on the loud, convention floor, putting it on and putting the little headphone things over my ears, it was almost unnerving how much I immediately forgot where I was. I was taken away.
Yep.
And then I got the opportunity to continue partnering with that company and get a headset at home. And every time I'm like, holy cow, I don't think I'm in my apartment anymore.
Yeah.
And I kept having an issue. I'd play this game that was like basically like Armored Core, where you'd fly around in a mech. And one of the things you'd have to do is like look up and pull a lever. And with where our desks were situated at my apartment, we had a ceiling fan right above our desks. And I even did this on stream. I'd keep reaching up and then whacking my hand on the ceiling fan that's running and like smashing the crap out of my hand. What ended up breaking it for me is I tried playing Hellblade on there.
Oh, yeah.
And all of the binaural whispering stuff like triggered something in me that I like ripped the headset off and never went back. Yeah. I wanted to go back a couple years later because like probably around Half-Life Alyx because so many cool games started coming out. And by that point, that headset was so dated, like there was no point in even powering it on anymore. So recently, just the past couple of months, I picked up a Quest 3.
Oh, nice.
And I'm very excited to game on it, but I've only used it for like work stuff so far. Like I got it. Basically, I want an Apple Vision Pro. I can't afford an Apple Vision Pro. It is $3,500 and doesn't game. And I also wanted to game because there's like cool, there's mods to play like Halo Combat Evolved in VR and stuff. And I'm like, this is incredible. I want to do this. But at the moment, I've been using it for like art stuff and like putting work things up. And it's been a lot of fun just walking around my studio and like pinning windows to my walls and stuff.
That's cool.
And so I haven't used the newer PSVR stuff, but that is the speed bump to adoption is everyone wants their own locked-in platform for something that is a niche on top of a niche.
Yes.
And it is a really hard sell because if you haven't experienced it, it is almost impossible to convey to you what the experience is.
There you go. I'm so happy you said that because no one can explain to you the depth. That is the trick that made it really immersive and honestly, like you said, sort of freaky because they do the stereoscopic vision and it does that 3D effect. So it is fake depth. It's not real. It's a gimmick. It is a gimmick, but at some points, and even on this 10-year-old headset, which honestly, when it came out, was kind of average, right? The PSVR 1 was considered extremely low spec back in the day. Cool at the time, but there were other alternatives that were better. It doesn't matter. The first time I sat in the cockpit of an F-18 in Ace Combat 7, and I looked down, and every switch and knob and button was coming up, and it had depth to it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So real quick, the games that I picked up and have played so far. Astrobot Rescue Mission. It is exceptional. It is awesome. I will say I understand why they have chosen not to port it just yet because the game relies on the DualShock 4's light bar being seen by the PlayStation camera. But that could be easily resolved. They would just have to, design some new things within the game for the PSVR 2's haptic controller things. And I get it would mean some work, but probably not a ton of work. Anyway, the game is very fun. Honestly, I do get kind of bored of it, which didn't happen with PS5 Astrobot. I can only play about 2 or 3 levels in Rescue Mission, and then I'm like, okay, that was cool. I'm kind of done. And Ace Combat 7 has been my favorite experience. That is just a normal, great jet fighting game that you can play. I grew up with that series, playing like Ace Combat 4 on PlayStation 2. They have a VR mode that has 3 missions in it. And those 3 missions are so cool. It is such a fulfillment of this dream. Like growing up playing Flight Simulator. It is the Top Gun simulator. I won't spoil anything, but every mission fulfills that fantasy so much, and it is so good. That is like the reason alone to have that headset for me. I will for the next, I had my cousin in town this last weekend, and we were hanging out, and the first thing I did was like, you got to check this out. Because he had played Ace Combat when I was a kid. He likes Flight Sim. He's got like a stick and a throttle, and he just loved it. It was absolutely that insane moment of like, you've got to try this. This is amazing. Beyond that, Gran Turismo Sport VR, which is a Gran Turismo game from the PS4. It was cool, but it absolutely, like the PS4 doesn't have the horsepower to push the fidelity that you need. Right. So it's pretty crunchy. It's a pretty crunchy game. Most people will say that Gran Turismo 7 is the PSVR 2 killer app. You have to have it. And that is the only temptation towards PSVR 2 for me. I love Gran Turismo 7. Love it. And So I'm like, well, we'll try a baked down version of it. It's all right. You can only race against one car, and it's kind of cool. Wipeout Omega collection.
I was surprised to see this on the list. I had no idea it had VR support.
It's my favorite VR game. I'm just going to tell you straight up. It's the best VR experience I think that I've had out of all these games. This game, unfortunately, the disc that I have is defective. It won't fully install on either of my machines, so I'm sending it back, and I got the digital copy. But you have 26 tracks, 46 ships, and 9 different modes. It's basically a Wipeout remaster collection. You can play it without the headset, or you can play the entire game in their VR mode, and it is pod racing simulator. It's amazing. They have so many settings, Epos, to help with the motion sickness, where you can limit the field of view in your cockpit with this really cool, nicely designed. It just pushes your console like UI out further on your ship. You have this horizon locking feature. And so even though it's so motion based and so intense, it really doesn't make me feel that sick. And it gives you so many options to feel good. Finally, Beat Saber. It's a staple. There's nothing really to say about it. It's super fun. It's really cool. And then I picked up an old copy of Skyrim VR, which I know everybody says you got to play that on PC. You need mods. It's terrible on PS4. It was not terrible on PS4. Traversal kind of sucks because if you have the move controllers, you just teleport around, or you kind of hold a button and you locomotion in the direction you're looking. Or if you play with the DualShock 4, like I did for most of it, it has so much elevation changes and it's so bumpy that it is really hard to not just feel sick. And so to round out all of that, I think it is super cool. I have loved it. It totally threw off my intentional gaming backlog experience because I just wanted to dive in. And like you, I would get lost. And I don't think I liked that feeling. Ace Combat 7, I would play a mission. They're like 10 minutes long. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. It felt like an hour, but absolutely motion sickness. Now it's gotten better. I get motion sick like really easy as an adult. I didn't as a kid. And so part of this VR thing was really cool because the first few days I'm like, oh, I can't handle this. This is too much. And the more I played, the more I got used to it. And I'm starting to, like, when you have that roller coaster drop feeling in your stomach, not have a sense of panic, which is something that like has been hard coded, like a fear that I've built as an adult. And this has kind of helped unwind that in a way. But no matter what, after like 15 to 20 minutes in VR, dude, I kind of have a little headache.
Yes.
I'm kind of over it. And I still have that slightly nauseous feeling. And so ultimately, as cool as this is, and I think it's amazing, and I'm still like, man, if PSVR 2 ever gets really cheap, I may want to pick it up because I've heard Half-Life Alyx is like a life-changing experience and I don't want to play it on this old headset, even though I know you can jury-rig it to a PC. It's still a gimmick. It's really cool, but this is no way something that has me super hooked after a few weeks where I'm like, this is all I want to play. I can only do like 15 minutes. So anyway, that's my long rant.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a patented Epos mild take here. You know, chunky sauce and mild take. Medium take even. I think console VR is always going to be a gimmick. Whereas I think PC platform VR doesn't have to be and isn't necessarily. Like I listen to your list and I'm looking at, you know, the options. With so much of the console space, because they want to also sell, you know, full games to as many people as possible. It's a bonus feature. It's a limited mode. It's this mini game instead of the full game. And I think back to the PS3 and how many games supported PS Move or the 3D mode on that little PS3 TV I have.
Yeah.
It was always this extra little thing or a secondary thing and not the full experience. Whereas on PC, there are more games than I could possibly count that are exclusive to VR or just have also a VR mode that is maintained on top of full dedicated experiences, which is not my thing, but you know, there are some people who live in VR chat and those kinds of things or VR development things. I don't know how as a console manufacturer you make it anything but a gimmick.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to limit who can play the games. And I think that's a recurring problem with kind of all of, and I don't mean to pick on them given everything good we've said, but kind of all of Sony's attempts at these kinds of gimmicks, be it
Yeah.
6-axis or motion control with the controller. Like, to beat some of the Astrobot levels, I had to, like, especially with the monkey hands, I had to turn off the motion controls.
I know exactly the level you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of cool at first, and then it's like, okay, this is actively hindering me from playing. I need to turn it off. And I feel like so often in this competition to compete with Nintendo, who is always changing the way you interact with your games, they keep coming up with these gimmicks, and they are still delegated to just being gimmicks.
Yeah.
And in a console space where you want as many people playing as possible and to be as accessible as possible, I don't know how you make it work. Whereas on PC, I don't think it's a gimmick. I think there are enough full games plus mods for existing games. Like, you can treat it as a primary gaming interface in many ways.
Yes. Yeah.
It is still limited, in terms of how many games compared to your entire Steam library or whatever, but like, the scale is significantly different.
Yeah.
And so I don't know in that kind of space if it could ever be more mainstream, because I don't know how you balance that, especially with, what that asks of the devs and support. It's just because clearly, there's a certain number of games or whatever every generation where Sony's like, all right, we're going to give you the budget to implement this new feature so that someone can demo it for us. Or they have Team Asobi on full tech demo duty now. Like, and they work closely with Insomniac to integrate all the new graphics features and everything. Like, clearly there's always that push.
Yeah.
But for like normal games, and especially any sort of cross-platform game, there's no Xbox VR. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't know how you make it work in a mainstream fashion when it requires so much of the developers and of the player.
It's a great point. And it's hard because I'm obviously assessing something that is now 10-year-old tech.
Yes.
On a 10-year-old plus console. And it is still extremely cool.
Yes.
I know.
Like,
go for it. Yeah.
I was just going to say what you described about like jumping in, playing like a 10-minute mission and it feeling like an hour and completely losing yourself in it. That is what we want from gaming. That is that feeling that all of us are still chasing from our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's amazing.
Yes. And I know Half-Life Alyx is one of those bucket list gaming things that I want to experience. I've had people in the comments yelling at me about it in every Half-Life video I upload. You have to play Alyx. It's mind-blowing. And so at some point, when the technology comes down in price,
right?
Something like a Quest 3, right? Or a VR 2 or whatever, there's a lot of trade-offs and things you have to think about. And I'm a different use case because oftentimes I want to get something in the console ecosystem so we can talk about that experience here on the show, right? And we have PCs because we do video editing and stuff. So it's nice. There's like this choice where, well, do you want to go this route or this route, right? I think it is remarkably cool and impressive. But ultimately, I don't know if I'll ever get over that barrier of after about 20 or 30 minutes, having that kind of the same headache you get watching a 3D movie.
Yeah.
We'll see. There's more games to try. I've got Blood and Truth coming in the mail, which a lot of people say is like the killer experience that you got to try. But yeah, I'm curious what you think of the Quest 3.
I have had similar problems with the headaches. I've been very surprised that I haven't had any motion sickness issues because I don't typically get a ton of motion sickness, but I do get it when there's a ton of input latency on a display.
Yeah.
I remember I used to get I thought I could not play BioShock because it starts out on in the water, and playing that on my parents' big plasma TV that had tons of input lag, and I didn't even know what that was at the time.
Yeah.
Like, I got super motion sick, and I'm like, this has never happened in a game for me, so it must be the game.
Yeah.
I have that kind of issue, and so I was really worried about that with the Quest 3. I was worried about, especially because I wanted to use it in the pass-through mode to do, like, real-life stuff with it. I was worried about those issues, and all of that has been amazing. Super low latency. The camera quality is very clearly not up to the Apple Vision Pro stuff, which is what I was kind of chasing. But it's still pretty neat to put it on and walk around my studio and more or less just like interact with things in real time. I can put down this frame on like my notebook and then start tracing things from 3D renders and like draw it on here. Like, really cool stuff. But even I spent like $80 on this fancy, it's called a Halo head strap to like make it more comfortable and all this stuff, and like just having it squished onto my, face and weighing on my head. Like I still get the headache after a while.
Yeah.
That, like you said, 20 or 30 minutes at most. And I'm like, all right, I feel it. It breaks the immersion. Like everything else, if everything is running smoothly, you have that sense of immersion and you're like, I am in this world. It is wonderful. But once you start feeling the physical pain, it's kind of confusing at first because you're like, no, I am in this other. It's like an out of body experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I am over here, and then you start feeling a physical pain. And it's like, what is that? Is that my body? Do I still have a body? And then you get pulled back to it, and it's like, oh man. And then you take it off, and you almost don't get relief when you take it off because everything starts decompressing, and it feels worse almost.
It took me like an hour after, because the first time I played Ace Combat 7. That game is full on. There's no FOV limiting. You're in the cockpit. It's dogfighting. It's challenging. Maybe I just suck as a pilot, but it was fairly difficult even on easy to finish that last mission. Like one of the cool squadrons shows up. You're just continually looping and spinning and doing stuff in the air. And it's a dream. But I powered through. I'm like, no, I don't need it. And I've had many sessions where you take the headset off and it takes me an hour before I feel normal again. And those are those trade-offs where I'm like, I'd rather just sit and play something else. I really want to say this. No one can explain to you what it's like. No one. The thing that, if I can try, in Skyrim, a game I've played, I don't know, everybody's played Skyrim to death, right?
Right.
Seeing depth in that world was unlike anything I've experienced. And that's the best way I can sell VR. You see the physical depth of objects in the space. And so going into a tavern and seeing like a mounted moose on a wall, and that moose is sticking out from the wall, and you actually see how big it is, or looking up in a tall building, seeing the rafters, at Jarl Windhelm's place, and it feels like it's 60, 70 feet up. You don't get that when you play Skyrim or any other game. Like, it's not the same. You really do feel like you're in the space, and that sense of depth is so cool. It also is kind of eerie, and it freaks me out just slightly because, like you said, that weird dissociation that you have coming in and out of that space. VR, where it's headed in 10 or 15 years, legitimately worried, because right now it does still feel, you get the gimmick, you get the technology, you understand it, but they will get it to the point where it is so freaking good.
Yeah.
And it overcomes these obstacles. It's Matrix, right? It's it'll be a super sick game, but you're like, I don't know, man. I kind of miss the old days of 2D grandpa on a TV.
So have you seen the video about walking in video games?
I have not.
Okay, so there's this really good video. I don't remember who made it. I had not seen them before, but it's about taking the time to just walk at normal walking speed through video games, and the things that you notice, and the different experience you have compared to just sprinting 24/7 everywhere.
Yeah.
I would connect that VR experience to that kind of thing. When you really, and this kind of ties into everything we talk about on here, when you really take the time to be more deliberate with how you engage with it, and just like slow down and be like, whoa, like you said, there's rafters up there. There's like a real roof up there. This thing is really mounted on the wall. Like when you really get to see it for how it is, instead of just a painting that you're sprinting past to get from objective A to B, like it completely changes how it feels. Now, take that from just moving slowly through it and wrap it around your entire body as if it feels like you're in real life, and it's crazy. Like you said, you still got to feel it. But I think that when you started describing like really just looking at what's on the walls, when was the last time you just like took the time to stop in a random room in a video game and actually look at what the artist put in there and think about how the people lived in there or whatever? Like when you slow down and really take it in, it changes things. And then when you do it when it feels like you're literally there, it really changes things.
I love what you just said, because yes, I've been in these spaces hundreds of times. I've never seen these things. I've never appreciated the scale, the level of detail. They build these incredible worlds. And it makes me think about games like, man, Cyberpunk 2077 in VR would downright be unreal. And I know there's mods for it and stuff, but there's just a new appreciation for it. So
it's not Unreal. They haven't switched to Unreal Engine yet. That's Cyberpunk 2.
With that said,
I gotta get you back for the PS3 though, okay?
Oh, that was good. I like that. Hey, another episode with the PS3 to thrown in there. That'll be next episode because I ordered a used PSP off of eBay. I'm excited to talk about that with you. Let's go back in time. Let's talk retro. PlayStation 1 and 2 in 2025. I know that the PlayStation 2 is your favorite console of all time.
Yes.
I don't remember the last time we talked about this on the show, but along with PSVR, I got my old PlayStation 2 here. I found old PS1 discs, and you were really kind. You sent me a Frame Meister, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. And this is a scaler from Japan that takes analog video signals and does a very good job with tons of granularity and a lot of settings of upscaling it so it looks nice on a modern TV. And I've been playing there, and all I got to say, the sound, the visuals, and the experience is incredible. There's no live service nonsense. You put the disc in, it launches. There's something wonderful about this. And I just want to sort of nerd out about PS1 and PS2 right now. I want to ask you a little bit about scalar options and what you think of playing retro games in this day and age. And so, have you been playing PS1 or PS2 lately? I know you're always kind of playing some PS2 here and there.
Yeah, funny enough, I wanted to share, I feel even more justified in my love for the PS2 after this past weekend.
Ooh, good timing. Okay.
We brought in, so I've shared, my family has been doing game nights occasionally, and we played through Paper Mario, the Origami King on the Switch with my kiddo, and we started up some other Mario games. But we weren't really clicking with the newer Mario stuff. Like, it's just really hard, especially with 3 of us bouncing around the screen. Like, it's just challenging to really do anything in.
Yep.
And so we wanted to pick up the original Paper Mario. And so I brought in my modded GameCube that has the SD card loader and all that stuff and an HDMI adapter. And we plugged it into the TV and started playing Paper Mario.
Yep.
And then my wife and kiddo started playing the original Animal Crossing, stuff like that. And so on subsequent game nights, my kiddo wants to see new games. And after playing a bunch of Astro Bot, I'm like, I'm going to show my kiddo Crash Bandicoot. And he specifically wants to play on the GameCube, or else I would have loaded up like the Insane Trilogy on our PS4 or something.
Yep.
And so I pull up, there's the not really 4th Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, which was picked up by a different development studio after the original trilogy. Was kind of a sequel to Crash 3 Warped. But it's not good.
Yeah, I've never played this one.
The GameCube version is the absolute worst version that exists. And growing up, I wound up, any Nintendo console I got super late. So like I got the Nintendo 64 right probably when the GameCube came out. And then I got the GameCube much, much, much later. I only had a handful of games. I had the Batman game, Wind Waker, Pokemon Coliseum, mostly just played Pokemon. Didn't spend a ton of time on it. Never really got it. And so as I've gotten older, everyone's love for the GameCube, I keep trying to go back to it. And I clearly keep picking the wrong games. And this was an example of that, where I put it in, and this Crash Bandicoot game feels like a fan-made game. The graphics are horrible. It runs horribly. Like, there are occasionally moments where suddenly it's 60 FPS, but the rest of the time it feels like 15. There's lots of bugs and glitches, and the hitboxes are bad. Like, it feels like someone's little Unity, I made Crash Bandicoot for the PC kind of project.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
And I started posting about it just to kind of share, because I'm a huge fan of Crash, even though I never played that specific entry. And apparently the GameCube one is just that bad. And while it's still not a great game, the PS2 and Xbox versions are fine. Like, they're at least passable. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I've always wondered what it was like on the other side. And I took a peek around, over the fence, and I regretted it. PS2 for life. Anyway, yes. So that I have been picking up some games recently. I think I shared in our last episode that I picked up Vagrant Hearts.
Yeah.
For PS1.
Or Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, let me go grab my stack. Hold on, 1 second.
All right. While he's doing that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you that I have been playing Legend of Dragoon, the PS1 RPG, on the PS1 through the PlayStation 2, and that experience has been exceptional. And along with that, some Wipeout, old Crash Bandicoot 1 and 3.
Okay.
Take it away, sir. Take it away.
Live, real time. So I've got Vagrant Story. And Vandal Hearts, Broken Helix, Disruptor. These are like old school games.
Yes.
The Grand Stream Saga, Jade Cocoon.
Oh, wow.
And the original Diablo, which apparently plays amazingly on the PS1.
No way. It had a PS1 port?
Yes.
Oh, that looks good.
And the disc is like amazing looking. It's got the big old Diablo claw just around the circle. Like, it's sick.
See?
And so that plus Crash Bash,
yep.
which if you all do not know, Crash Bash is a very underrated it's basically like Mario Party for Crash. But it's good. Just like Crash Team Racing was actually a good kart racer, Crash Bash is actually a really fun set of mini games, and they have never ported it up, remastered it, remade it, included it with any collection. It is still stuck on the PS1, and that is such a shame.
And you know what's tricky? Some of these things, like a Vagrant Story copy or Klonoa 2, it's really tough because there's $300-$400 discs out there. The bummer is there's just not an official way to pick up some of these really classic games. Yeah, there's the premium library on PS5, but we've talked about that emulation in the previous episode. It's after playing hardware, I can tell you I have zero interest on the emulation side anymore. And it's not to knock it. Like, there is incredible stuff. DuckStation's amazing. I don't want to knock DuckStation. It's great. But the PS5 syrup emulator by Implicit Conversions, I think, has a lot of room to improve. But there is something insane about the fact that you have hardware PS1, so you can play everything on PS1. Mm-hmm. I only have the PS2. I sold my PS1 when I was a kid or traded it into GameStop or something. But the PS2 has all of the PS1 hardware except the GPU on board, right?
Yeah. So...
You got the sound chip, you got the processor, and for the most part, it is so good. And I'm telling you what, Legend of Dragoon, hearing the MIDI files triggering in real time on that sound chip with that reverb, there is bass so deep on one of those tracks, I had to stop and check myself because it does sound like the audio coming out of a DAW. Like when I used to make music on Ableton, if you didn't throw on that good old EQ8, roll off the bottom end that speakers wouldn't normally carry. It's like that. It is like sending out this beautiful, super fat, amazing sound. And it just looks so good. The models aren't upscaled and look super crispy while the backgrounds look like junk. It is wild how great it is.
Something I think is not often considered for people who aren't super familiar with these things is how important that original hardware is for these older games due to the way they were made. Like you said, the music is not just a sound file being, I mean, I guess technically a MIDI file is a sound file, but it's not just playing a recording of the music back. It is rendering it in real time. And so much of older hardware from PS1 back, some on PS2, but once you got to the PS2 and Xbox, this kind of stopped. But it all had specialized hardware to generate and render individual components of graphics and sound. You had different sound chips that played together to make the sound, which is why there are still synthesizers being made with sound chips from the Sega Genesis and the Commodore 64 and things like that, because that is the only true way to get that sound. I have something called the Mega Synthesis, which is basically like a Sega Genesis synthesizer that is designed for that very reason. And same thing with graphics. Like on the Super Nintendo, you had like a couple different things that played together to make your graphics, and then the cartridges that could do proper 3D stuff had extra graphics hardware on the cartridges that played a role in rendering those games. And same thing on PS1 and PS2. Like you had the multiple different graphics like processors that did, even on the PS3. Like that's why the PS3 is so hard to emulate, as it had like 3 or 4 different graphics processors responsible for different aspects of the image that came together and were put together. And so emulating that isn't like modern computer games or modern console games where it's just a baked piece of software that you just need to make run. It is a stack of hardware rendering. It is not just software. Like it is hardware rendering happening. It's not just, I have this movie, I just need to make it HD. It is taking it back and getting the feed from the original broadcast cameras or something and trying to make like that's the difference. And that's why it matters so much. And when you get to experience it like that, when you hear that difference in the music or see the graphics, which again, you can tweak a lot of stuff on DuckStation 4. It is just heartbreaking that the official capacity is always so bad. And it's the same thing over on Nintendo side. Like the virtual console's always been horrible.
Yeah, it's
like Nintendo could make it perfect.
Yeah.
And they just choose not to.
No, and the community has done everything. Yeah. I'm so nervous to even talk about anything in that direction because they are just incredibly
I'm not saying
aggressive,
any Nintendo emulator exists. I'm just saying that the one they provide sucks.
Yeah, VC and Nintendo Online. It is. It's look, if you have played the game on hardware and then you play it on one of these subpar emulators, you feel the input lag, you see the issues. Yep. That is compromising. Yeah, for many, it's like, okay, yeah, that's an okay way to play. But I think more awareness in this direction is beneficial because there is a lot of people, or there are a lot of people going back and enjoying these older games and appreciating not just rose-colored glasses, not just nostalgia. There are some genuine benefits for the game design on some of these older titles. And I know we talked about that previously, but real quick, could you just briefly explain a scaler? Like my cousin who visited, we played NHL 98. A game that we had played when we were kids. Super old school game on the PlayStation 1. Ton of fun to play it with him again. But trying to explain, most people know like, hey, I have maybe an old console in my closet, but my TV doesn't have component cables anymore. And then they start looking or hearing about a scaler and they're like, wait a second, why do I have to spend basically the price of a new console to see this? And obviously the prices are coming down. There's a lot of other options, but briefly, talk about that, the transition from analog to digital, because this scaler has changed everything for me. Compared to the cheap little Amazon scalers I was using just out of necessity for budget, this is unbelievably cool.
Yeah, so analog video is not... okay, let's start at digital video. Digital video, you were just sending pictures to your TV. It is, everything is already rendered on your console or your PC, your Blu-ray player or whatever, and it is just sending still images basically in order to your TV that is being played back. Analog video is an electrical signal. It is a sine wave at a certain frequency that is generating this signal and rendering it onto your TV one line at a time. And so it is, with old school tube TVs, CRTs, they are drawn from the top to the bottom, and you had older games that were like 240p that would skip lines in order to get crisper details and avoid the interlacing artifacts, which was the combing artifact where you see the different lines in the rendering.
Yep.
It is a live electric signal that just fluctuates and sends video. That's not compatible with digital. It is a completely different medium realm of existence. It's like trying to print out a radio wave on a inkjet printer. Like it is just something printers aren't even a thing most people have these days. I'm so old. Anyway, it is an entirely different realm of operation. And for a while, the early HD TVs and stuff had inputs for this anyway and just had really crappy basic scalers built in. But these days, modern TVs just don't support it. They're like, not enough people have VCRs or Super Nintendos anymore. It doesn't matter. And so you need some way to convert that older analog signal with these older connections, composite, S-video, component, SCART, whatever, to your digital HDMI. Now, as you mentioned, there are tons of cheapo things on here on Amazon or eBay or whatever that will do this, but they use the lowest possible cost hardware that are not optimized. They're basically made for VHS tapes where the quality doesn't matter, input latency doesn't matter. You just want a signal on your screen. And that's fine if that's all you can afford immediately. I would argue that there are still cheaper options that you can afford if you do the research.
Yeah.
The problem is video games are a special medium. You do worry about input latency. Even if you think you've never cared about it before, when you experience... So something that there's a YouTube channel I will shout out called Retro RGB. They're like the hub of all things retro. One of his biggest sticking points is input latency is kind of unavoidable in the modern era. It's not the fact that it exists that's the problem. It's that these cheaper devices that convert your signal have variable latency, which means in one moment when you're trying to jump over a block in Mario or something, the latency could be 2 frames. And in another moment, it could be 4 frames and then back down to 2. And you cannot get accustomed to variable latency and timing your movements, or for me, it would cause motion sickness in like more first-person-y or third-person kind of games. You can't get accustomed to that. Whereas at least if it were static, like a frame or two, you'd get used to it and it'd be fine. These cheaper devices, it just fluctuates all over the place. So your video gets totally out of sync and all sorts of stuff. And it gets really, really blurry because older games were made with big chunky pixels. And most of these are just designed to really blurry upscale things. And to me, it's very important to try to seek out better options, which I will talk about in just a second, because especially for games you played as a kid, if you go back and you experience it through a really crappy display, a really crappy version, be it emulated, upscaled poorly, whatever, you're gonna think that it wasn't as good as you remember. It's gonna contribute to this narrative that good old Jim Ryan, former head of PlayStation, was all about, that old games look bad and play bad and thus aren't worth protecting, preserving, continuing to release.
So wrong.
Which is so wrong. When you actually get a good experience upscaled from these things, it's a completely different experience. So a scaler is a device that takes that analog signal and both converts it to a digital signal that your TV can recognize, but also literally scales up that analog signal to be bigger to fill your frame. And there's a bunch of different technical ways that this could happen, but the good ones designed for gaming do what's called a sharp upscale or an integer upscale, which takes those raw pixels and just evenly multiplies them so that they stay sharp and consistent. And so you can get a Super Nintendo game on your 4K TV that looks like it's native 4K because all of the pixels are preserved at a perfect ratio and aren't smoothed out or made blurry or have lines in them or anything like that. And then it can get really complicated from there, going with like actual CRT emulation and other sorts of
black frame insertion.
And, yeah. Now,
keep going.
There is, like I said, a range of devices you can do this with. There's the cheap Amazon devices, which are technically scalers, but they're really crappy ones. They're made with the cheapest hardware that's been around for 20 years that were made for just basic VHS tapes and shipped inside TVs that are going to be blurry. They're going to have variable lag, and they're just going to look like garbage.
Mush. Total mush.
Yes. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there is the bougie devices like the RetroTink 4K. This device costs $750. I am not telling you to go buy this. It is the bougie, I live in retro games kind of device. Yep. Now, the extra features you get, like we just talked about, it will basically turn your 4K OLED TV into a CRT. It is magical. It is amazing. That's fine. You don't need that. There are a couple cheaper options, such as there's a DIY project called the GBSC AIO, which takes an existing video scaler that was on the market that was okay and basically upgrades the firmware to make it nice and adds the fancy deinterlacing, which I'll talk in a moment, and all that kind of stuff. On the cheaper side, if you don't want to deal with that, there's a device called the RetroTink Mini.
Yep.
Which doesn't scale to 4K. It just takes your signal, it deinterlaces it, and it scales it to 480p. This is important because a lot of older video games, especially from my favorite console generation, the PS2, are what's called interlaced, meaning that because of the way older TVs rendered, you got a field at a time, which is about half of the lines of the screen are shown and then they alternate. And on the older TVs, you can't really tell because it's just so fast that it's like you're getting extra frames. And a lot of games on these older consoles are rendered that way. Well, pump that into a modern TV and you just get the alternate lines and you can see what's called combing artifacts, which just looks like someone took a shredder to your image and it looks really, really bad. So there are a bunch of different fancy ways to deinterlace. The RetroTink Mini just does a basic, what's called Bob deinterlace, which basically just simulates what your TV does and just kind of alternates the fields. And it's not the best looking thing in the world, but it is leagues better than whatever scaler your TV might have built in and those cheaper Amazon devices. And you get a nice, clear digital picture that is in the progressive scan that your TV can support, and then your TV can scale from there. Now, the reason you might want the bougie options is because your TV still has to do that legwork of scaling from 480p to HD or 4K or whatever your TV supports, which not all TVs are great at. Newer TVs are getting better and better and better about it, thankfully, but a lot of older TVs are not super great at it. And so getting that native HD or 4K output means your TV's working with the best signal possible to handle and will run a little bit smoother. There's also something called like I said, that deinterlacing process of converting those separated lines into a progressive, just still image. There's something that the FrameMeister has, and then the fancier RetroTinks and that GBSC device have called motion adaptive deinterlacing, which is not perfect, but does a lot better a job of adapting to the different ways that the game is rendering and smoothing out that interlacing that looks a lot fancier.
Yep.
That was a really long-winded explanation. Basically, it takes the old stuff, makes it new, but makes it look really, really nice, whereas that $18 thing you got off Amazon is going to make it look like doo-doo and make you think your older games, you were just a dumb kid and they weren't worth playing. Well, and that could not be further from the truth.
And to put, you mentioned the highest end, the 4K, the RetroTink 4K. Honestly, for most people, like a 2X, which is $140, is going to be a really great solution, or something like that in their lower and mid-range options. But like you said, there's always trade-offs. This is a rabbit hole. This is a whole universe to kind of get involved in, this analog video stuff, and it is cool to nerd out about. But I will say, it has made me appreciate PS1 and PS2 again so much more. Obviously, if I could have the space and could find a big old CRT television, I would love to play it that way, because nothing beats that experience. And this is getting to be remarkably impressive, but still part of me is just blown away. With analog video, we had decades and decades and decades of innovation. And when we transitioned into the digital space, right, we left behind. It was like starting over entirely. And it's pretty cool. That's what I would say, is if you have an older console, you have interest in this space, begin the research and do your homework. I think that's the hard part. Is a lot of times people come in, well, what do I buy? What do I need to buy? And they want the fastest, quickest, easiest solution without understanding the mechanics of how it works. Some of the best, most engaging YouTube content I've ever seen in my life is My Life in Gaming, a channel that covers all of this in depth, in one of the best series probably ever on YouTube. And so I would encourage, it's like twofold. If you are interested, start binging some of that content, right?
Yes. And if you want the easy entry point, like I said, the RetroTink 2X Mini, $99. It's a bit of a pill to swallow, but it got a little more expensive after some shortages in the pandemic. But it will take any console you have, from original Xbox and PS2 down to the original NES, and give you HDMI, and that is the best place to start. And then I'd recommend, like you said, My Life in Gaming, lots of other avenues for research, retro RGB as well, and just figure out, what we're not trying to do is push you to eventually, like you said, get a CRT or buy a RetroTink 4K, but to find where your priorities lie. Like, what experience are you chasing, and what is the easiest and cheapest way to get that for you? And doing a little bit of research and diving in, like you said, My Life in Gaming, their RGB masterclass, like that will help you go through all of the options for either every individual console or just on the whole, and just figure out exactly what it is you're looking for.
Yep.
And you will see, like, old games can just, they can look so nice.
It's incredible. Legend of Dragoon looks just as good as I remembered it as a kid. It's amazing. Yeah. And the models no longer look out of place. This whole journey began because when we got the PlayStation 5 in December, I got the PS1 Legend of Dragoon on PS5, which is using implicit conversion syrup emulator, and they upscale the heck out of the bottles, but not the world, because they're pre-rendered backgrounds. And so you have these high poly looking characters who stick out like a store thumb. Everything just looks off. The things that are too sharp are not blended well into the world. The sound is not the same. And there's little warbles and sticks and hitches and lag and things that didn't exist in the original. And you go back and you play the original on a scaler. It is gorgeous. And it gives me an entirely new appreciation for the level of technology that they put into these things. I booted up Burnout 3 on the PlayStation 2 EPOS. It has a 480p mode.
Yeah.
Putting it into 480p and then changing the little profile on the FrameMeister. How is a console from that long ago so good? This 60 FPS game is amazing. It was so fun. The licensed music was exceptional. And
that era of just all the music in the games was so much fun.
Yeah, and I don't want to get locked up too hard in nostalgia, but I am telling you, there are some things from the past that were incredible that we have left behind.
Yeah.
And to put a tiny bow on it, 2 stories. The first, the retro game stuff is so full of joy, and you can play for 20 or 30 minutes, be fully satisfied, go about your day, and you'll still want to come back again. Like, I want to play SSX every day. I want to do a couple of runs. Burnout 3, anytime I put it in, it was so fun. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. It was just fun, and you don't get that same style outside of a lot of indies these days. The AAA space has lost, I think, some of that ability to capture 30 minutes of fun with no strings attached. Okay, and then the story I've been super excited to tell you about. I got 3 hours into Legend of Dragoon over on PlayStation 5. And I'm like, oh man. I started playing on PS1 going, this is great. But time is limited. I don't want to go through that same 3 hours again. Not that it's that long. So you helped me last year hard drive mod my PlayStation 2. And so I've got hard drive in there. It's got the McBoot stuff. So essentially, you can take a USB thumbstick and copy memory card saves from a thumbstick onto the memory card and back and all that stuff. I went online. I found a depository of Legend of Dragoon save files. And I found someone who was basically where I was at on the PlayStation 5 version. Took that save file, threw a few little conversion softwares, got it in the format it needed to be, threw it on a USB thumbstick, put that into the PlayStation 2, copied it onto the memory card, and boom, I was where I was at on the emulator. I'm now on like midway through disc 2 of this 4-disc game. It was one of the most surreal, cool experiences that I was so excited to share with you, because this is wild that decades old game, you could do something like that. And it's a good incentive to me to pull all my saves off of my old memory cards and start to back those things up.
Yes. And I have videos on Lost Saves about backing up memory cards because it is very important. Those things will not last.
Is there a battery in them?
I don't actually know. I don't think so. I think they're writing to internal memory. Like, I don't think it needs a battery for it. But it's flash memory from 20 years ago. Like, that stuff wears out pretty quickly. And even back in the day, like, it was super common to get corrupted saves and whatever. Like, the worst stories I have heard are from people that are like, I pulled out my parents had all my console, or, my PS1 in my attic or whatever, and I put the memory cards in and everything's corrupted or whatever. Like, if you still have those saves and you care about them, back them up in some way. You can do it natively on the PS2. If you have it modded, you can just dump them to the hard drive or whatever. But it is so crazy, to be able to take saves from the PS5 effectively and then boot it back to your PS1. It's something we've also lost along the way. I miss Game Sharks and action replays and being able to effectively mod games on consoles for fun. We lost that with trophies. I still remember when I got my PS3 Slim. I don't know why I wouldn't have asked for Xbox 360. So I don't remember which, but I remember going to like a Best Buy and looking around and then talking to a guy who worked there. And I'm like, all right, dude, where's the Game Shark? Like, I got my new console. Where's the Game Shark? And they're like, nah, man, they don't make them anymore because achievements and trophies. And I'm like, I don't care about that. And then
my man.
Yeah.
I'm there with you.
Even with save files, like I started my Mass Effect Legendary Edition playthroughs on the Xbox One X. I'm like, I kind of want to move it to PC, both because I'm kind of done with my Xbox consoles and so I can do modded playthroughs or whatever. It is literally impossible to port your Xbox saves to PC. Like, there's a lot of games, and especially on PS5, where you can just put them on a USB drive. Like, there's a lot of situations where you can. It is literally impossible to put your Mass Effect Xbox save in the PC. Even though I could do that with the original trilogy on 360.
Everything is, I don't want to say everything's getting worse, but this is going to segue really nicely into our topic after the break. So we'll see everybody in just a moment. All right, so I made a video this last week, e-post, talking about why the internet feels different now. I have been so excited to talk with you about this. The original idea came from a viewer comment. I made a video talking about my PlayStation 1 experiences recently. Definitely resonated with a lot of the stuff that you and I just discussed about older games. But Kadoku9672 had left this comment. I want to read the whole thing and then just expand into this conversation. He said, "For me, the problem is not video games. There were fantastic games before, and there are still fantastic games now, as well as bad ones. For me, the problem is the internet itself. I don't think the internet is a bad thing, per se. It's an amazing tool, thanks to which I've discovered many things, video games, music, etc., that would have been impossible otherwise. But in the last few years, I have noticed how it has saturated me in all aspects, and that has affected my enjoyment of things. I've never been a fan of social media, so it's not something that's influenced me that much, but I've had this problem with YouTube as well. Opinions all over the place, FOMO, negativity regarding the new releases, absurd controversies, disgusting thumbnails, and what's worse for me, spoilers. It's practically impossible to avoid them even if you try hard because of the algorithm. I miss the times when you didn't know everything about a game on day one or sometimes even before its release, and you talked with your friends about it for a long time, forming theories, sharing experiences and discoveries. I miss when people enjoyed something more and didn't get tired of it after 2 days until a new stimulus came out to focus your attention on. And in the last few years, the more I've reduced my time on the internet, the more I have enjoyed things again. The internet has a lot of great things, but I think sometimes it's good to stop and think about the relationship we have with it." I loved that comment. That landed on so many notes that have resonated deeply with me because since 2011, I've thought the internet is the coolest thing ever. I still think it is extremely cool, but there is no denying it. There has been a shift, a dramatic shift. I want to say there's no clear moment. For me, I can pinpoint like 2017 and 18, but I miss the more organic internet of old with the niche communities, the slower paced engagement, and of course, not the obsession with algorithm engagement driven stuff. So I know you can comment a ton on a lot of the issues that we face currently. And why don't we just start there before we discuss this a little bit further? You have been an internet connoisseur long before me, and I feel like you always have the answers, especially on how tech can fit into your life in a really beneficial and meaningful way. So why don't we start there? How do you perceive modern internet versus, let's say, 15 years ago?
I've been in the middle of actually scripting a main channel video about this. I describe the pre-2010s internet versus the current internet as a pull versus push internet. Before, in the geriatric olden times, the internet was, and I love that Kudoku, by the way, refers to the internet as a tool because it's not these days. And that's the problem, is it was supposed to be a tool. And each individual type of service, a messenger, a social media site, whatever, were supposed to be tools that we used for specific things. And now everything wants to be your everything. But before, the internet was a tool. We went onto the internet and pulled things we wanted from it. Information about Google Maps, or MapQuest back in the day. We'd pull up how to go somewhere, whether a restaurant was open. We would try to pull new information about a game or look up game facts, our little plain text guides.
Yes.
To older video games. We'd go to it as a separate place. We'd connect to it. We'd pull the information we'd want, or we'd spend the time doing a certain thing, and then we'd disconnect. We'd log out of it, and we'd go back to normal life. Yep. Modern internet is a push internet where everything is pushed to you as much as possible, and in an attempt to keep literally millions of dollars are spent to keep an extra second of your focus on your phone, on an app, on a service, whatever. On a game. And it is an entirely different paradigm. I am someone who could be described as terminally online for almost my entire life, despite my parents after a certain point did not want me to have internet in my room or a computer in my room because they didn't want me to be someone who just lived there. That was just who I was meant to be. But it's significantly less fun in the modern era.
Yep.
And it's disappointing because I don't think having access to a computer or using a computer or a game console or any other technology needs to be less fun. But the fact that it is inherently tied to internet access and all the things that comes with it kind of sours it a bit. And I miss the days of coming home from school and clicking onto my Windows 98 computer or my Windows XP computer and, firing up Space Cadet Pinball or my Hot Wheels games or whatever, and like writing out my homework and Word. Like, I realize a lot of these things just became normalized over time, and obviously that is part of how the charm is lost. But part of it is also like everything wants your attention all of the time.
Yes.
And that is the number one factor.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. No, they've paid some of the smartest people in the world from a psychology standpoint to design systems that ensure you're engaged. And I think what's so clear to see now, at least for me, social media has not been on my radar for a long time. It seems like that sector has gone downhill for a very long time. But the number one emotion that drives engagement is anger and outrage. And what's funny, as I've been trying to use YouTube more intentionally and to avoid the homepage recommendations and to just stick to my subscription inbox, I haven't pruned my subscription inbox in 15 years. And so going through video after video after video, it's disturbing to see this trend where the modern paradigm for so many of these creators is outrage on every video. And I can't unsee it. Now that I'm looking at it and seeing this, 80% of these videos from these creators who have been doing it full time, it's just anger about an update, a patch, a release, or whatever. And when you see it all lined up like that, they're just playing the game they have to play in order to maintain the ad revenue that they get and to be shown on that homepage. Another one of these big shifts that I love that you mentioned, the push versus pull, because subscriber-based economies and follower-based economies like YouTube used to be was you like a creator, you subscribe, and then you would see their videos when you logged in on that sub page.
Yeah, I'd log into YouTube and go see if CNanners posted a new video. I wouldn't wait for it to be fed to me.
Yep. And now there's so little guarantee that your subscribers will ever see your video. Oh, yeah. Subscriber didn't watch your latest upload. It doesn't take into consideration maybe that video didn't resonate with that sub. Maybe that person wasn't on YouTube that day. But oh well, algorithm has said, nah, it's not the engagement we're looking for. We're not going to show you any more of their posts. You know how many times you get comments from people who are like, I haven't seen one of your videos show up in like years, dude. And it's like, yeah, that's the new paradigm. Think about Facebook. Okay, I don't really like Facebook, but there was a long era where you followed pages and groups and friends who you were interested in, and that wall honored that agreement. You would see a chronological feed of mainly that, and at this point, it's the complete inverse. Your wall is 95% garbage you don't care about, that's outrage and anger motivated to keep you scrolling more, and not your friends or the stuff or the interest that you actually want to see. And we've lost things like forums and message boards where these more niche communities, discussions that would happen on that 2010s style internet, it was moderated by people. Those sites were managed by human beings, not algorithms. And if you didn't like the style of a community, you just found another one.
Right.
But unfortunately, modern internet just kind of sucks in contrast. If you aren't intentional about how you use it, if you allow them to treat you like a sponge and you soak up what it's sending you, every platform at this point, like the big ones, are fully compromised by that algorithm.
And a big thing on top of the algorithm is the centralization of it. You bring up forums, message boards, chat rooms, all of those niche communities basically went to Reddit. And Reddit can be good for certain things, but Reddit is a singular centralized platform, which means everyone's in the same room, just sitting in different corners. And that means while you can't, like, it is currently the best place to get access to most niche hobby communities, whether, I don't want it to be that way, but currently with how things have shifted, it is. But it is so strongly affected by site-wide policy changes, by weird politics, because everyone is in the same room effectively. Like, so much bleed over from other communities happens, and all this weird drama that just wouldn't be tolerated on forums back in the day and stuff happens. And there's an inherent bias towards manipulating you as the user, because Reddit's sole goal is to keep you on the platform. Yep. And even with all that, like, it is still algorithmically curated in some form or fashion. And that is everything in one place. And so if Reddit goes down, if Reddit gets bought by a bad actor, if a bunch of subreddits try to do a site-wide protest, everything you could possibly hope to learn about countless niche hobbies or education things are just all gone.
Yep. And it's hard to find. That's the trick, because I have been very much wanting to find a way to use the internet more intentionally. Because like Kadoku's comment said, the less he uses the internet, the happier he is. That has been absolutely the case for me this last year. When time became more limited and I started to be more intentional with it, I've always tried to be intentional, but really I would say there was a eureka moment last spring when I stepped away from live service FPS games after being in that loop for 5 or 6 years. And just having this breath of fresh air, I started stepping away from following those communities and that content that ultimately was all negative, right? Angry about patch notes, angry about updates, angry about lack of new games, angry about everything, basically. And it was because all of the content that's being promoted everywhere was just super outragey, focused to attain that algorithm status to be seen by more people. So I've used the internet a whole lot less this last year, used it differently, and it has impacted me mentally. It makes me a lot happier, and I just am not pulled in so many different directions. But now that I'm actually trying to go out and, let's say, find a cool PlayStation fan site with good discussion, I've really struggled. Every time I land on a site where I'm looking, it's basically the same model as any other online kind of gaming article publish house. Make 50 articles a day. Most of them have a negative spin to get the click and to get the ad revenue from people viewing the page. I'm not saying there aren't awesome spaces out there, but you really have to look, and it's not easy, right?
Yeah, it's a big chicken and egg scenario. That is why a big push I am making for this year with my content is to encourage more people to just put their humanity online, to make those fan sites, to make their own personal blogs or whatever, because when we get back to people doing this, that is where things spring up from. And I also wanted to counter a little bit. Obviously, the big driving thing that most people experience, and that is definitely, like you said, inherent to the way things are structured, is that negativity.
Yeah.
But I would argue that it's kind of any emotional reaction.
Yeah, it's a good point.
When any angle, whether it's anger or fear or even encouragement, there's such a thing as toxic positivity.
Oh, yeah.
And so many communities get locked into that, where they basically try to encourage you to stick with something you're not enjoying or you aren't succeeding at, because it keeps you in the circle, it keeps you on the site, it keeps you buying things like, oh, you just need to buy this camera or this lens or try this filter or whatever. Anything that can make you feel something to keep you locked in is something you did not choose. You did not seek that out. You did not log into the internet and decide you didn't. If you've ever read, or if you've ever watched Blade Runner or read the book that inspired it, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yes.
They have basically a little home console that where you tune your hormones to tune what emotion you're going to feel in the moment.
Yep.
Even that, as dystopian and cyberpunk scary as it is, I think it missed the mark in failing to predict how cynical things would actually get, because even in that scenario, even if you're conditioned to do it, you are still choosing to tune your emotions in a certain way. Yep. Whereas you do not get that choice with the internet. You don't log in and be like, I want to be happy, because we try that. Like you said, you want to log in. I want to log into this niche community. I want to feel inspired and feel great. And instead, I swiped up on the wrong short and was presented with someone trauma dumping about their dead dog. And the next thing I know, I'm like super upset and feeling things I never signed up for.
Yeah.
Or I'm ordering 3 new camera things that I never intended to buy today because suddenly I feel like it's going to make me more creative, when in reality, it's going to sit in my shelf and shame me into never using it.
Yeah. And I self-control is the ultimate here, because I don't like blaming platforms. I don't like blaming we all choose. Like, it's ridiculous to be upset. Like, I choose to log on to YouTube. I would choose to, I don't really scroll Twitter anymore, but when I would choose to do that. That's my choice. right? And I don't like when people are like forcing large level changes. We have to be the change. And I think that's what gets me so excited about what you're sharing in that video. People putting the cool things back out there. It's not that I want to control my experience to ensure I only have positivity, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen plenty of game communities where you have like the no salt subreddit.
Yeah.
And all they are is continually at war with everybody who's on the other side of the fence. They've somehow managed to turn all of the internet into team A and team B. Yep. And it really, a lot of times it has nothing to do with positivity. It's still just, I'm on this side of the fence and I'm going to argue louder than the other side of the fence.
I like toast. Oh, so you hate eggs and hate everyone else who likes eggs, huh?
That's everything now. And so I know that there is a shift coming if there is enough people talking about this and being intentional with it.
Yeah.
But my gosh, dude, I genuinely miss the way things were. I don't want to get stuck in the past. I know nostalgia is a double-edged sword, but truly, finally being able to put words to this feeling is really nice, because I've felt this way since like 2017. Like something's wrong. Like something has changed. And it was very lonely. And now these kind of conversations, a lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people miss the more organic, disconnected nature, the slower paced thing of the internet. And it really is all smartphone and social media tied. You know, once we had the ability to have this screen in front of us at all times, and it's valuable to have that engagement time, everything shifted. Everything changed.
I do want to emphasize, like, you have to find better replacements. And part of that means taking the extra time and energy to have those real conversations or to do something else. But also, like, going back to the difference of old internet versus new, a lot of that often means, like Kudoku said, just spending less time online sometimes. This weekend, we started spring cleaning. And so Saturday, we cleaned out a couple rooms and vacuumed. And then my sister had a performance, so I went and took pictures at her performance, and we went and did that. And then yesterday, we cleaned the rest of the house. And I was barely ever on my phone. I had no clue what happened online. I had no clue what was happening in my Discord server. I didn't know any gaming news or drama or anything. The only online thing I really looked at was in my little app for my 3D printer. I was going through and saving stuff I wanted to print because that was exciting. And otherwise, we just cleaned and did stuff at home. And like, I felt so good last night. We ended the night, we jumped back in some Marvel Rivals, and I felt so refreshed. But if you just go uninstall all your stuff and then sit there in your chair and are just like, what do I do now? You're going to feel way worse and you're not going to get anywhere. I see there's this subreddit, which is a terrible place. Don't go there. Like even the people who run it admit like it's turned into a complete mess. But there's the subreddit called No Surf, which is people who try to like break their social media addictions and whatever. And every single time there is like someone posts and they're like, man, everything just feels more depressing now. I got rid of all of my dopamine sources and now everything feels miserable and nothing makes me happy. And the obvious answer is like, yeah, you can't just get rid of them and expect to summon your own dopamine. Like you still have to replace it with some higher quality activities. And with that, I also want to tie that into gaming specifically, because I think similarly of how we are surrounded by the internet, we are saturated, drowning in the internet. A lot of people, and at certain points in my life, myself included, people drown in their video games. They are spending too much time. Like they get that they either didn't have rules as a kid and so they spend all their time doing it, or they reach that point in adulthood where they're like, no one's going to stop me from spending all weekend just playing World of Warcraft or whatever. And it feels good at first, and then it stops feeling good. And it's because gaming is no longer this reward, this high quality activity you seek out. It is your baseline default.
Yeah. And
when it becomes your baseline, you miss all of the good things about it. Kind of like we were talking about earlier about like walking versus running through a game. When you aren't sitting there and appreciating the very fact that you got to sit down and spend 30 minutes playing a game today.
Yeah.
Immediately it's less fulfilling, it's less satisfying, and it's less rewarding. And I think you saw a video about this.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because there's a small channel called The Retro Dan. I'll leave the link down below. I loved this video, and he basically talked about this exact feeling. Gaming feels better when it's earned. And the idea is when you get your responsibilities done, the real life tasks taken care of, you're like doing all the important stuff. Gaming becomes a reward rather than the distraction. And ultimately, procrastination is the center of that discussion. I think if you have a bunch of really important real life tasks that are just waiting to be done and you're running from them by playing games like in an irresponsible way, that creates a sense of like gaming guilt. And so the idea is it's fairly simple, right? We were taught this when you were kids. You got to eat your veggies before you can have dessert. And if all you're eating is dessert all the time, there's consequences to it. And people can spend their time how they want. And there's just consequences to all of our decisions, but I relate heavily to this. If you have ever, this overlaps with the internet discussion actually quite well. Maybe the reason people also feel so rotten is they're not getting done the high quality leisure activities they want. They're not knocking out the responsibilities that they need to. We now have this beautiful harbor, whether it be games or social media or scrolling. You can just escape into this space. And that space now is designed to trap you there with not high quality content, the stuff that is psychologically designed to just keep you scrolling and angry and all this stuff. And it compounds on itself. I think this is wild because there's two layers to it. When you organize the day more intentionally and you have that balance, gaming is more fun. Maybe internet time becomes more fun if you're intentional with it. But does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when I brought up like I miss the era of like coming home from school and hopping on the computer or whatever. A big part of that is that restriction. Especially, I think we had dial-up way longer than a lot of people around me, and so that feeling of finally being able to literally dial into the internet and connect to it. Yeah, I'd be able to log in and play a little bit of RuneScape, check in on my AIM or Skype or whatever to instant message some buddies. And like, it was this great feeling of like, I can't wait to talk to this person. I can't wait to play this thing or whatever. And compare that to what the equivalent would be now is you get home from work or school and you sit at your computer and it's like, all right, I'm going to do my dailies and my weeklies and my monthlies. Oh, look, everyone's losing their minds in the Discord again. I got to moderate these people or fight with them, whatever. Like, it's not a reward anymore. It is like I said, a baseline, a default where the day-to-day negatives stand out significantly more than the one-off positive experiences. And I'm trying to be more deliberate about that with certain things. I am trying to limit when I have a new rule that is also going to become its own video of I don't buy anything online until after I don't buy anything online after 10 p.m. And that is because it is so easy with social media and everything else to just be like flushed into ordering this thing on Amazon or this random website or whatever because you think you'll use it, especially for me. Like, I think I'll use it for a video. I think it'll improve my setup, whatever. And then I regret it. I forget I bought it. I don't get to it for weeks and then it's kind of pointless and then I can't even return it. I want it to be a rewarding experience when I sit down and I'm like, I have the money, I have the right mind space, I have the right thought processes here, and I have made the choice to buy this thing, and it becomes more exciting. It's like going to the toy store as a kid when you actually get to go versus you get to drive up there whenever you want as an adult, and you just kind of go up there every week, and then you stop having fun buying the things. Like, think about like how much less fun it is to just pull up your PlayStation store on your console and have every game that you could shop through versus your once monthly trip with your dad or something to the game store where you got to pick out the fun game you're going to play that weekend. Like you said, you just have to structure things in a way that is both healthy and rewarding, and anything can become more fun and more enjoyable and healthier.
If I didn't buy another game for the rest of my life, I'm set. Yeah. There's enough games in my closet. I've tried to keep everything from PlayStation 2 onward for the most part. Sold the GameCube. Sad about that. But there's enough here to be stoked and enjoy this hobby for the rest of time. And I do try and slow myself down. It is hard because we do make videos, and so part of me wants exposure to things to talk about and share with people, but that becomes its own unique trap. That's not really that true either, because the most fun I've had is always picking one game, sticking with it, finishing it for the most part. Because like you said, that infinite choice is not more gratifying. These Game Pass and streaming subscription things are very cool, but I have less attachment with these things.
Yeah.
I mean, what, to tie a bow on it, what do you think would be your recommendation to somebody if they feel in a situation similar to us right now and they miss the way things were on the internet, something just doesn't resonate or feel right anymore? What would your recommendation be to them, or even your younger self? If you were telling your younger self about this transition and how things have shifted, what would you share?
The worst part is my younger self would have been like, okay, Grandpa, I love the internet. It's this cool new thing. I'm never going to get tired of it. And so it's hard to fathom that, like, in that older mindset. But honestly, like, I truly wish I would have put more time into my other hobbies when I was younger. Art, music, photography, any of it. Getting better at physical games like sports or darts or any physical activity, because it's better for your brain. And like, eventually you get a little tired of games. Like what you pointed out about, like, if you stopped getting new games, you'd be fine basically forever. Part of that also comes in the fact that as you age and as time progresses in general, you're going to spend some of that time that you would have spent gaming when you were younger doing something else anyway. You're not just going to be hardcore cover to cover, beating every game and then running out in 2 years. Like, you're going to spend less time with it. That first step is finding something you've been interested in for a while and didn't follow up on, or finding the thing you might be interested in and engaging with it. Just supplementing a little bit of your internet or gaming time with something else that seems exciting and fun. Acting, drawing, skateboarding,
music,
hiking,
instruments,
music. Literally whatever. And once you get in a groove with that sort of thing, you're going to come back and you're going to be like, well, no, I don't want to stop doing that thing so I can scroll Twitter for 10 minutes. Like, no. At no point will you come back and miss a lot of these things. Now with games, you will fight FOMO a little bit more, but I think it will help you, as we have talked about endlessly on this show, it will help you fine tune your actual priorities of what you want to play. Because we've talked about not rushing to get everything. You made the list at the start of the year of games that are coming out this year that you do or do not want to play. Being able to like prioritize that makes the game so much better. Because I could look at that list that you had pulled up and be like, sure, I could say that I'm going to get every single one of those because that's like a default behavior. It's like, yeah, new game, get. Will I play them this year? No. Therefore, should I get them? No. Which ones do I want to play right away? Doom. Let's start there and then move on. And immediately Doom is going to be so much more fun because I have been excited for it and because I have been waiting for it. Whereas if I got Doom and this and this and this and this, Doom would immediately be less impactful.
Yeah. In fact, I think I pulled that list up this last week. Funny timing. I'm not interested really in anything new right now. Doom, I am excited for, but Monster Hunter, no way. Like, well, I think this is wise because, again, I feel a lot of emotions about this. And for me, I love what you shared about finding other hobbies and activities to do. I think community is really important.
Yeah.
We talked about, I think, Atomic Habits, that book, many, many episodes ago. But the community you surround yourself with matters a lot. If you have a goal and you are surrounded with a community of people who share that goal or that value or that sentiment, you are way more likely to stick with habits that support it. Whereas if you're in a community of friends or family or whatever that are so antithetical to your values and your goals, I don't think there's any scenario where you're able to uphold a habit in that environment. And so for me, without throwing shade at tons of people, I've just seen this with a lot of friends and family, their default pastime is that phone. It's pulling up Instagram and scrolling. And I really hate seeing that. It like disappoints me greatly because I know how low quality that short content is. You and I know what that like zombie feed brain rot feeling is. And I'm not trying to be judgmental or high and mighty or whatever, but more and more when I see that, I'm disappointed. I'd rather talk to somebody about the latest book that they have read or what kind of, like you said, sport, right? A cycling buddy or something like that. And so I know it's important. The community aspect, obviously spending less time online is good, but really assess that space that you're in. For many, that, especially like online live service games, they're just stuck there because that's where their current friend group is. Yep. And if you were to poll, when I was like deep in the loop of just playing live service FPS games, I bet if you were to poll the majority of the players, do you like this game from a scale to 1 to 5, the majority would say no. The majority would be like, this sucks. And they play it for years and years and years on end.
Yeah,
and they don't understand why they're miserable.
Yeah, that used to be the trope with the League of Legends and Call of Duty scenes of like, these people only play this game and yet they're miserable, except now that applies to like every multiplayer franchise.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's another pitfall I see a lot of people in the No Surf subreddit fall into is they will complain that like they try to hang out with a friend and all the friend does is scroll TikToks or whatever on their phone. Yeah. What do I do? And the first step is obviously to ask them, hey, can we like actually spend time together? Obviously, you need to have an activity planned. I think people have forgotten that just quote unquote hanging out without like a goal in mind has always been something where you occupy yourself with low quality things, like whether it's browsing the TV or whatever, like it's kicking a can down the street. Like it was never a high quality activity. And so you need to plan that, ask them, and otherwise start hanging out with people that like actually want to spend time with you, or like, you know, some sort of light, not aggressive, but, you know, light ultimatum of like, hey, I don't feel like we're really spending time together. Can we try to really connect here? You can't just expect that you're going to make the change and everyone around you is going to be enlightened and be along board with you or something.
What is it? Are they called third places? Have you heard about this? I only saw a video suggested to me, but I feel like
I've heard the term. It is clicking something in my brain.
Okay, so like coffee shops and Barnes and Noble and all of these hangout places that existed that are kind of gone. Yeah. In many ways, that was like that old gathering point that was useful. So much of those physical locations, like a bowling alley or an arcade or those cool, fun spots to kind of hang out and disconnect, they're just sort of gone. They're just kind of gone. So you're going to have to be pretty... Again, it's all about intentionality. I think we should continue this in the next episode. I want to chew on it and think about it because there's way more to unpack here, and I really like it. And if the viewers have thoughts on it, please share down below. That'll help form our discussion in the next episode of the podcast. And with that said, Epos, where can people find and support your amazing work?
If you're interested in more of this tech life stuff, Epos Vox pretty much anywhere. And on the gaming side, I am Lost Saves on YouTube.
Most excellent. Thanks, everybody. All the episodes available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, all the usual things. Deeply appreciate you and hope it's a really good week. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again very soon.
Bye-bye.